Wonderful.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Yvonne Schwab, ACG Silicon Valley CEO. I'm excited to present you today's event, How 2020 Changed E-commerce Strategy Forever, in collaboration with RSM. For those of you new to ACG Silicon Valley, we are the leading business-to-business networking organization in Silicon Valley, providing connections, thought leadership, and enabling personal and organizational growth. ACG, if you don't know, is a worldwide organization offering an array of networking opportunities. With 13,000 members and 59 chapters all across the world, ACG provides local connections with a global reach. Now, if you haven't had the chance, please check out our new ACGSV website. With the help of Aloha Cloud, we now have a wonderful web experience we can offer to our ACGSV community. And that said, we're also offering a variety of virtual events in the coming months. We invite you to visit said website at acgsv.org to see the full calendar. We're excited to have an event in collaboration with Santa Clara University on gender and racial bias in venture capital. We also have our, I think, bi-monthly round robin networking event with the San Francisco chapter and a Zoom makeover, up-level your online screen presence. We're starting 2 new circles. The Cto Innovation Circle is holding its first event on February 25th with the topic Responsible Use of AI. And the Young Executive Leaders Circle will meet for the first time on March 3rd. More information coming soon. Now, we're excited to offer you today's event, which would not have been possible without our sponsor, RSM, a multinational network of accounting firms forming the 6th largest accountancy professional services network in the world by revenue. Thank you. I would now like to introduce you to our moderator today, Joe Benfadi, a partner at RSM. Joe leads the security, privacy, and risk consulting practice of the firm's Western markets and specializes in security, privacy, and third-party reporting. Now, without further ado, I give you Joe.
Well, thank you. That was a nice introduction. Yes, I appreciate everyone's attendance today. We've got an interesting topic that was born from some earlier topics. I think as Yvonne mentioned earlier, and I forget, I feel like it was in August, we held an event just dealing with how companies had at that point kind of evolved and reacted to the pandemic and all of the shelter in place, stay-at-home orders and various requirements and jurisdictions around the world. And one of the things that kind of bubbled up from that was the impact on e-commerce and why, many companies, of course, have been embracing a strategy of some sort for some time, many. Accelerated certain plans, learned a lot, had to be extremely nimble and quick. And across our client base in particular, we've seen, all manner of reactions. And we felt it would be a good conversation now, particularly that we're in 2021, to kind of talk about some of the stories that we have. And we've got a couple of guests and panelists that we've invited to kind of give their perspectives. And would it be all right for me to hand it over to Bonnie and Mike to maybe make a brief introduction as we start, and then we'll go into the questions? Why don't we start with you, Bonnie?
Sure. I'm Bonnie Boone. I am Director of Marketing at Shells Coffee, which is a San Francisco-based coffee company here. We specialize in pour-over drip coffee, so you won't find any espresso drinks in any of our shops, and majority of our coffee shops are in California, but we've recently opened up in Chicago markets as well as DC, Maryland, Virginia. And so, yeah, I'm happy to be here and share what we've been learning and doing over the past year or so as we've shifted some of our retail strategies to focus on our digital products, so e-commerce and mobile. Yeah, I'm originally from New York and have lived on the West Coast for about 8 years now, and find myself living it out here with a sort of like easy weather and easy access to outdoor activities. Yeah, just excited to be here.
Very good. Yeah. How about Mike?
Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Brenneman. I'm with Sonic Commerce, and we're an e-commerce platform. We're actually a Dutch-based company out of Rotterdam in the Netherlands, but we're the strategic e-commerce partner of RSM. So we do a lot of joint implementations with them that are integrated into their Microsoft ERP practice. And so I'll look forward to sharing some of the experience of what I saw from a different lens than Bonnie. With a breadth across companies from small market to mid market and even up to the enterprise, and some of the challenges that we saw last year as a result of some of the disruptions, and some of the ways that we saw companies pivot and get creative. So look forward to our session today.
Good, great. Thank you. That actually spawns a kind of a spin up, I guess, notation on my part, and then into some of our questions. And by all means, folks, reach out with questions. And Yvonne, if I'll ask you kind of interject them, or if they can chime in, I'm not sure if they can unmute themselves. We would be happy to make this a casual and interactive conversation. I myself, based in San Francisco, I serve the technology industry as well as some large retailers and e-tailers, and really the nexus of kind of this topic was, some of these things that related to, a lot of our clients that we help and assist and serve in some security and privacy reporting areas, but also on the more the implementation side with Mike and team helps us for companies that are actually implementing platforms, implementing ERP packages, and implementing elements of an e-commerce strategy that which, by the natural course of business evolution, were on a particular path. Many accelerated such plans. So with the first question, Bonnie, I'll maybe start with you. Representing an actual company that had the impact of suddenly not being able to have nearly as much walk-in traffic as, of course, your business would, and many businesses and many of our clients would have. And I know we've gone through several evolutions of that, but how have the events of last year, most notably the pandemic, changed your e-commerce strategy for a start?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it changed it, dramatically. For Phil's, we are, our bread and butter is our retail brick and mortar coffee shops. And so when, pandemic hit, you were open one day and we literally had to close the very next day. So we basically just shifted our strategies to meet the consumer where they were, and we saw that they started purchasing online. We also have a mobile app, so we saw people starting to purchase orders through the mobile app, and shifted our focus, our strategies, our tactics to e-commerce, to, again, just take advantage of the fact that people were still buying coffee and they were interested in it. And so it just meant reevaluating some of our strategies and giving ourselves the opportunity to really invest a lot more than we previously had planned. So, I think it really opened the door to kind of see what we were capable of doing online, and reevaluating anything from our website offering to our product offerings to our marketing strategies. And so it was really challenging, but in a way, it helped kind of spur the conversation to really invest a lot more in e-com than we originally planned going into 2020.
Yeah, I can see that, and I can see it kind of falling. And Mike, I'll roll the next question to you, but as I see it fall, I mean, you're in a particular category because at the end of the day, coffee, you've got to get it soon. You can certainly order it online. I know a lot of folks back home in San Francisco are ordering it, and could have it delivered by one of the many services. And then, there's other options. Whereas I saw, if you've seen the latest Teams commercial where they kind of highlight a bicycle seller, right? Same boat, right? A bicycle probably less, immediate because it doesn't need to cool down. But there's obviously a lot more configurable options, and they kind of, in that commercial, kind of introduce it as a game changer for retail that might be persistent. And that's one of the items I wanted to delve into today, is the persistent effect. We certainly will be able to go back to our coffee shop of choice, our bike shop of choice at some point, maybe not as crammed in as usual, but there's certain questions about the persistency and just the natural evolution of buyer behavior. Certainly we've been on a trend of ordering and having things shipped to us up to and including our groceries. I can't tell you the last time I've actually been inside a grocery store. And you know, that kind of path was already on its way, but there's certain divergence in product sets that require a little more interaction. When you go into, say, a Williams-Sonoma, right? You know, you're going to look at the product, you're going to test it, you're going to have it explained to you if you're buying a custom bike. And Mike, you've got a broader purview of kind of different customer sets or client sets. Well, what do you think? What have you seen from a trend perspective of folks, you know, adapting what strategy they've had or reinventing the strategy during the course of this year? And how do you see that persistence, meaning that it'll stay part of their business model as opposed to unwinding and returning to whatever the old normal was, which seems unlikely? What do you think?
It's a great question. And it's funny, I was watching TV last night getting ready to go to bed, and that Teams commercial popped on, and I thought, how can I weave this into my conversation tomorrow? So thanks for stealing my thunder.
Oh, sorry, but they've been slamming that one left and right.
Yeah, no, I think let's kind of split this up into two categories and look at it from a couple of different lenses, right? First off, you've got buyer behavior. And I think the reality is that, and you all have probably seen the statistics, you know, whether they're from Satya Nadella or some, you know, other tech crunch. We just saw 10 years worth of digital transformation accelerated in a 3-month period of time, right? And e-commerce and digital transformation have been hot topics for a number of years now. And there have been certain certain industries, certain verticals that have been a little bit slow, and lagging behind in moving towards that, you know, online sales experience and digital transformation. But I think what we've seen now is that, you know, the younger buyers, right? This is what they expect. And it's the organizations that are, you know, they're in feed and tackle, right? They're good old boys, if you will, that have been slower to, to adapt. But I think that, you know, COVID-19 and the disruptions that we had, have forced people out of their comfort zone, you know, in their 50s and 60s and even beyond, right? To where we're not going to see those buying behaviors change when everything goes back to normal all of a sudden, you know, hopefully, knock on wood, in the near future. But so I think e-commerce is here to stay. I think we're going to and I've seen all the statistics and the predictions out there. I mean, whether it's us, people like me and you that are buying individually on Amazon as a consumer, or whether it's, you know, B2B organizations. 96% of purchases by the year, I think 2030, are going to be made online. So I think it's accelerated that in a huge way. As we flip over to the business side of it, away from buyer behavior, it's brought a lot of interesting change. And that's what, as I mentioned earlier, you know, focus on creativity and pivoting, and you know, some of what we've seen in the market, it's been pretty interesting. I think everybody is trying to figure out how to get more omnichannel, right? Whether it's for the now or whether it's for the future, to protect themselves from the next supply chain disruption, right? Or the next COVID, or whatever it is that comes next. And I think that's the big message is we're seeing companies that are trying to get more omnichannel. They've sold, you know, manufacturers, as an example, that have sold historically through distributors or wholesalers that are now, starting to figure out how to go direct to consumer. You can't do that without e-commerce. Companies that, maybe only sell in the United States, you know, opening up a second web store and or a wider footprint into Canada and or other markets. I think what's been interesting is to see all these organizations, whether you talk about breweries as an example, that are starting to manufacture hand sanitizer, that it's an immediate additional revenue channel. But again, it's now forced them outside of their comfort zone into e-commerce, and they're going to figure out a way to continue to leverage that, you know, moving forward. So anyhow, a little bit of what I've seen.
That's funny, and I appreciate it. So the chat engine works, and I can actually see it without messing up the screen. So I'll get into that. Someone's pointing out, which relates to your point, and Bonnie, I'll pivot back to you here in a second, because along kind of the issue of just, supply chain disruption. I mean, there's certain components of that, and certainly, really the last mile has been the challenge in terms of getting the volume that we need. Because, again, a lot of the buying behaviors, as you suggest, have already driven to, buying, things online, including perishable goods, groceries. And when I think about, well, it's interesting, when I think about perishable goods, honestly, outside of ice cream, which I live right up the street from a Ben and Jerry's, one of the few retail locations at Haight and Ashbury that exists. That's close. I don't know that I've ordered ice cream online to be delivered by Uber Eats or DoorDash yet, but coffee is among those. I did it once, but the most extremely perishable. When you kind of think about that last mile, or whether it's the last 2 or 3 blocks, I mean, the dependence upon that part of the element of the actual customer delivery component is going to be extremely key. And I know early at the onset of this, even Amazon struggled with getting enough drivers and enough of that infrastructure, because suddenly it was that or nothing. Now, as it relates back to an extremely perishable, you need a hot coffee. Bonnie, what do you see as the future for that particular element of the business, the super uber perishable goods that you'll have a storefront, but maybe your storefront strategy will change, and you'll lean into that. What do you kind of see for Phil's in terms of 21 and 22 as you kind of continue to unwind the pandemic and prepare for the next one, which might be very different than this?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think to your point earlier, Mike, about buying behavior changing, right? So there were supply chain challenges, right? All of a sudden you had so many more people buying coffee, and the for better or for worse, Amazon has conditioned everybody to expect deliveries same day, 9 p.m. And so for us, it was definitely a challenge to work through some of those logistics, deliveries, fulfillments, just to set expectations that we're not necessarily Amazon, and while coffee is a daily commodity that you need to enjoy, I think there were a lot of learnings that we came out of that, especially in the beginning when everything was shut down, of how to optimize for that experience, right? And so much of that experience is tied into how your customer perceives your brands. When they're not getting their shipments in time, or when they're getting it late, it can have an effect on how they feel about the brand or the shopping experience. So it was a good challenge to have to work through. It kind of forced us to have those conversations earlier than later. And what was interesting also was seeing people, as people have left the Bay Area, and most of our customer base is still here in California, right? But as we saw people leave the Bay Area, we saw, demographic, geographic composition of our consumers change. And I think it will, to your point, younger generation, they're used to the buying like this. They're used to ordering on Uber, and so like a lot of our strategies did pivot to how do you get people their coffee when they need it, right? So we have partnered with Uber Eats. And so you can get your cup of Phil's coffee or your bag of Phil's coffee and your pastry, without having to leave home. And if you do want to leave home, we still have a mobile app. And so it to your point, again, like digital transformation, like that has just exploded. And for us, we're a coffee company, right? So digital transformation in itself is a huge endeavor for us. But we've always been really excited to have that conversation and to be able to see how we can, again, meet the customer where they are and what they, for whatever way that they need to get their coffee. And so I think for us, like delivery has been another, eye-opening kind of challenge. We're also beta testing in a few of our markets outside California, curbside pickup, which I know a lot of brands have also pivoted to, especially for retail. So for us, it's starting to see how the customer behavior has changed. Before we were, I would say, our e-com customer was our e-com customer, our retail customer was our retail customer, but now a lot of that fluidity, has gone between channels, even for wholesale, like people going into groceries and now buying our bags of coffee. So it's just having, I think, more understanding of how the consumer is purchasing or where they're buying their coffee from now, and what they want the experience to be. So I think, even though we're not necessarily a tech company, we have been able to have those conversations of how do you start to change some of your strategies based on how the consumer is purchasing, and where are opportunities where we can just meet them wherever they are.
Right. And I think that brings a question, and not to throw Mike a curveball, because this wasn't part of my plan set, but what my preface is you mentioned that, right? The logistics for fulfillment is so dependent. I always say Uber, meaning the other Uber, even though it is Uber. Meaning extremely dependent upon the efficacy of the partnership, and then of course their channel volume has dramatically increased. I have some friends that own a pizza shop in my neighborhood back home that, of course, their business, dropped off, immediately when they had to close the door. They quickly pivoted to, we'll open the, front windows and you can order online and, come and pick it up. But they'd already partnered with, I think, 4 of the delivery companies. And, they asked me, they were having some problems with it because just all of a sudden, I think, something like, 80% of their business was walk-in, and all of a sudden that collapsed to near zero. And then they were extremely dependent upon their partners. But, they had 4 different systems for each one, a different input channel, a different transaction module, and they were just having all kinds of conflicts, even printing out and tying which receipt goes to which, and all kinds of technical issues. And it just occurred to me that it would be great if there was just a common platform for them all to plug into. Uber Eats has their own. Caviar, DoorDash, you can sign up for all of these, but you've got to get on their system. From a systems perspective, Mike, what do you see are the biggest challenge for kind of what is going to be the persistent set? Because that the fulfillment provider and kind of the back systems that you have to implement to make that work and be efficient are, and certainly have this past year been make or break for many businesses. But as you continue to see this trend, expand, people are looking for some sense of permanence, right? If they capitalized on this channel to survive the pandemic, they certainly want to kind of see it as an area for strategic growth, and that opens up a lot of opportunities for integrators and technology providers alike. What are your thoughts in that arena? What we're going to see next year, this year, I guess they're already in.
I think we're going to see a bigger shift towards ERP integrated e-commerce. I think it'll be interesting because everybody, as Bonnie mentioned, everybody has been tuned to the 48-hour delivery, right? Worst case scenario. Sometimes it is the same day. And so I think there's 2 things that need to be kept in mind, is first off, you got a lot of organizations that are on old legacy e-commerce platforms, right? And so there's a huge shift of organizations right now that are starting to upgrade off of the legacy technology towards newer platforms. And as we see that, or new organizations that have never done e-commerce before starting to select a platform, I would suggest try to find something that is truly integrated into your ERP system. And integrated is there's a big difference between integrated and interfaced, right? Make sure you do your diligence and know the difference between the 2. And the reason that that's so important is because it's going to help streamline all of the back office efficiencies, right? If we can have an order hit online and then hit the ERP system in real time, we're pick, packing, and shipping that much faster and getting everything out the door. And the more you can enable, your customers to be able to self-serve online, the less burden you're going to put on your back office staff, whether it's sales, customer service, or on the finance side, pulling up invoices, et cetera. So I think that's something that is awfully important. And the other thing is, at the end of the day, it's all about customer experience, right? And communications with your customers. And a lot of the organizations that are on legacy platforms or that don't have an e-commerce, web store, they can't communicate with their customers quickly and nimbly, right? So, the most important thing you can do when something like COVID hits is be transparent, right? Change the website. Put up a disclaimer. This is what we're doing, as far as sanitization. We're checking the temperatures of our employees as they walk in the door. And by the way, because of supply chain disruptions, you may expect a bit of a delay, right? But if you set those expectations with your customers and you're transparent about them, I think that goes a long way. And people are reasonable at the end of the day, and they want to support local business, right? And companies like Bonnie's, probably now more than ever. So, also choose a platform that is flexible and allows you as a business to be able to easily make those changes, right, without having to call a third-party design agency or a developer that has to go get into the code to make those changes too. So a couple of things that I think are important, and we'll see a lot of organizations shifting to putting more of an emphasis on that integration aspect into the ERP system.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. We've seen a lot of clients that have, by order of necessity, had to get some degree of interface to temporarily survive. But you're right, that's a good distinction, interfacing versus integrated. And they're sometimes misused interchangeably. And, I've had folks that have to, do a couple things. They have to receive the order, print it out, re-enter it, fulfill it, put it into their own system. And then, it's actually, obviously they were doing it in a period of panic to just, any sale is a good sale when our stores closed, when our products just kind of fell offline and we had to kind of reinvent ourselves. But Bonnie, back to you, given, your designs for expansion, it's very good to hear that you've, expanded into some key markets. Has this affected your growth strategy for the coming years? Anything in particular that this enables you to do faster or hinders you as things slow down? You said DC area?
I would say, again, it's given us the opportunity to drive more awareness for e-commerce. A lot of our customers, our coffee shop customers or mobile customers, don't actually know that we have an online web store. And so when pandemic hit, it was just a huge opportunity for us to even just drive awareness that we have that available. And so looking at what people were purchasing, how are they purchasing, it allowed us to even pivot and provide new product offerings, which we never previously did before. And we had online only blends, so like online exclusives. We offered free shipping, again, to kind of like exacerbates your issue because now you have more orders to fulfill. But at the same time, it's, I think, what customers have come to expect from e-commerce. And so that has just been kind of become baked into part of our strategy and offerings. And so I think it's helped us pivot quite quickly to test more easily than you can test in store, right? When you test new drinks or new products in stores, there's a lot of operational component you have to think about for retail. The execution to bring a new product in store is far more difficult than it is to bring it online. And so we've been able to get through a lot of testing, I would say a lot quicker than we did before. And so growth in that, we're able to learn and iterate and refine a lot quicker than we were before. And, being on the marketing side, the beauty of digital marketing is you can see results, quite immediately as to how people are resonating with either your messaging or your product. And so being able to, again, just iterate and test, learn, refine a lot faster, I guess would be the good thing coming out of the pandemic. And then in terms of growth, we already had a pretty extensive pipeline of new store openings that were supposed to be slated for 2020. And as, areas have been opening back up, and, the sort of benefit of having some stores outside of California markets is that, they've had better luck, I would say, faring in the pandemic. And so a lot of stores in Chicago and the DC area, they didn't, they weren't in a situation where they needed to shut down entirely. And so we've had outdoor dining available the whole time. Well, now it's winter there, so nobody's sitting outside and having coffee, but it helped tremendously through the summer to still have stores that were open more than we were in California. And so for new stores, we have still new stores slated to open this year. And I think it helps from a communication and marketing standpoint to still, I think, bring joy to people, right? Like there's excitement when you're talking about new products. There's excitement when you're opening new stores. So I think we're able to provide that for our customers, just, you know, a little bit of something to look forward to this year. And
Yeah,
so
right.
again, it just helps speed up a lot of conversations that we've had internally. So like looking more closely at data, you know, really drilling down to see who that e-com customer is. Again, that helps inform, you know, what new limited time blend we can offer them, like what's going to be interesting to them, what other kinds of promotions might they be interested in. So I think while it has been challenging, it's also been really, really interesting to see what we're able to do. How can we scale so much faster in e-com and be able to take some of those learnings that we're finding from our e-com store and then actually bring that to execute in retail. So it's kind of a different shift almost in our approach. But the good thing is, you know, we can test with our online customers. We also have, you know, customers in stores that we can test with and kind of compare what that, you know, what that experience is going to be as it changes over the next few months.
Yeah, I would say that makes sense. And then for a company like yours, I would assume the ordering of priority for kind of how you think about, you know, marketing and, you know, everything from supply chain to fulfillment was based upon the store model and then extended by the e-commerce. You know, this last year's proven, well, the store model's got to be kind of put on hold. The e-commerce, so things like drive up. And I know, you know, some of the folks here in the Bay kind of complain because, you know, some of your competitors in other locations have a greater preponderance for having just a drive-through store. I mean, it's not even a walk-in store. You just drive to the, you know, the little hut or whatever. It's a small store and they just, you know, hand them out the window. I would see, you know, for this type of situation, that's great, right? But even the footprint strategy might change going forward, just so when the next one happens, you can still kind of operate the storefront, because I think you're right. People just want to go somewhere and buy something just to do it at this point. They're so sick. While it's great to order everything online and have it delivered, people like the shopping experience. And, you know, for other retailers with a physical footprint, you know, there's going to have to be a lot of planning that kind of goes into it. But on the e-commerce side, kind of blending those channels together. And I know this in my world becomes a, you know, a privacy concern or an issue, is because it's good to kind of be able to track buying behavior. There's been a lot of emphasis of wanting, you know, geolocation tags to be able to identify Jane is near my store. Let's push to her offer for whatever, right? It's still, you know, a marketing, you know, emphasis or a priority. And there's ways that you can do it and ways that you can't. But I mean, I think in the future, it's going to be, you know, incumbent upon us to help us solve these issues to kind of maximize the value of that spend and that marketing spend, so that you can kind of optimize, you know, for the whatever the new year will bring us, but what will bring us for years to come. It's the lessons that we're learning now will probably need to last. And, you know, I think buying behaviors will achieve some sort of a balance once, you know, the vaccine is fully distributed and everyone's kind of back to normal. I think we've trained, you know, essentially a generation of children to basically think that this is a thing now. When I was a kid, certainly, you know, I remember, you know, everything. You're crammed into physical spaces for almost everything that you do, and you wanted to do that and you like it. This year has been a year of none of that. So space design plan. I mean, I'm showing you the design for our offices. Even we're going to have to kind of rethink it to kind of, you know, persist, so we don't have to close the office down next time completely, but there will be some balance. And it's all going to be about balance. And with that, Dan, I'll kind of pivot back to you, because when you kind of talk about the convergence of an e-commerce strategy, you know, you represent a wide variety of customer sets, right? Those where there's a, you know, brick and mortar in shopping experience, and then those where there's an e-commerce element. And I've got clients kind of in both of those categories as well. But as one channel rises to meet, mostly because of necessity, to meet the needs of the business, because the other has been completely shut down temporarily, you know, where do you see the priority of people, you know, kind of devising their strategy from an integrated ERP perspective, everything out to fulfillment, as being kind of the new, I hate to say this, I hate saying the new normal, but the next normal, I guess, is kind of future-proofing the business to the extent possible, you know, for this.
Yeah, it's interesting as I look back on 2020. I can divide our prospects and customers into two different camps. You got one camp that's batting down the hatches, right? And they're just trying to weather the storm. And then you've got a whole nother camp that all of a sudden has a little bit more time on their hands, you know, and is saying, you know, I'm going to figure out how to use this as an opportunity to make some changes, you know, start to digitally transform and come out stronger on the other side. And you know, the difference between the two is so incredible. I mean, to give you I'll paint two examples of two organizations I was working with last year. So the first one is a company up in Canada. They're a manufacturer of fuel and oil. And they had actually been talking to us for about 6 months on and off, you know, doing some research here and there, you know, and thinking about e-commerce for their core business. And then back in April, I ended up getting a call from one of my business development representatives, and she asked me, "Can you do a demo in half an hour?" And I said, "No, I don't do demos in half an hour. I need to have a discovery call with the customer. I need to understand the requirements. I need to, I don't want to show up shooting from the hip, right? And wasting everybody's time." And she said, "Well, Mike, these guys are in a pretty unique situation. And if you can do a good demo today, and depending on how quickly we can get them live, they're actually willing to sign off and move forward with the project." And I said, "All right, well, book it, let's go." Long story short, 5-hour sales cycle. And the caveat was they needed to go live in 2 weeks. And I told them, you know, if we can all work together, us, them, their Microsoft partner, you know, there's a chance that we may be able to do 2 weeks. But to have truly integrated e-commerce, you know, it's a bit of a project. And we ended up going live in 19 days. But what was interesting there is that they had 20 salespeople in their organization. And when COVID hit, they started manufacturing hand sanitizer, disinfectants. And the problem is that their salespeople were so over inundated, they couldn't keep up with the orders, right? They were having to manually take the orders, rekey them into the ERP, just like you were saying earlier, Joseph. You know, and they were afraid that if their customers didn't get the product fast enough, they were going to go someplace else. Not to mention, now they've got 20 salespeople back office who have become order takers. They're no longer sales guys. Right? They can't go grab new accounts and, you know, convert new business, right? So these guys are thinking ahead, and they're trying to figure out, you know, how do I keep a nostril above water, right? When it's hard to do with everything that's going on. B, how do I get back and provide to the community, you know, in a time when these are, you know, these are necessities that are hard to come by. And C, how do I position myself stronger, you know, to come out on the other side? And now they've come back and they've implemented a second web store for the gases and oils that they create, you know, and they were able to scale that out, you know, that much faster because they already had a platform in place. On the flip side, I was working with an organization over in Las Vegas. They're a fresh produce distributor. And they distribute to all of the casinos and all of the restaurants in Las Vegas. And like literally Bobby Flay is one of their biggest customers, right? Bobby walks into his, you know, his walk-in cooler, and, you know, he, you know, jots down what he needs, you know, and then he emails an order over to, and, you know, the point is Las Vegas, you know, was brought to their knees. And this company is down 70 to 80% year over year revenue. And they were in the process of trying to select Microsoft Dynamics ERP and layering our e-commerce platform into it. And they didn't move fast enough, and they still haven't done anything. And I sit back here and I like to think of what possibilities they may have had. You know, they could have created a whole new channel, right? I could have started distributing to grocery stores. You know, when there were supply chain disruptions and grocery stores couldn't get enough of certain products, I could have, you know, completely shifted, you know, and started selling my, you know, fresh produce to grocery stores. But these guys are sitting there with their hands tied behind their back right now, and they're just batting down the hatches, weathering the storm,
Trying
and
to survive.
It's gonna be a rough next couple of years for them as they try to recoup. So.
Yeah, there's no doubt those two industries in particular, hospitality and you know, the airlines and a lot of the transportation companies have been hit because obviously, you know, That's it. And I feel like there's some degree of permanence with that. Even as an accounting firm, we're looking at, travel. And I think, that's, it's a valid point. One of our very large retail clients decided that their SOX program can be executed, completely remotely, which is interesting. I said, well, you could have decided that 5 years ago, but you didn't, right? The behavior in the business world was FaceTime, you got to fly somewhere, you just do it. Everyone's flying everywhere for every little meeting and everything. And they said, you know what, we can't this year. So does that mean we can't do any of this? Well, no, we can. And they did. And they just said, you know what, God, we saved, $5 million on travel. No, going forward, no one's going to travel for their SOX compliance program for this company at all. It's all going to be done remote. And I think you see that, perpetuate through a variety of industries where there's just going to be less. So it's going to be more, presumably more concentrations of people staying where they are. And I think that will change the dynamic for local businesses, because when I think of myself, I think I traveled every week of 2019. And when I compare that to 2020, right, obviously I didn't travel at all. So it's very interesting. One of the participants asked this question. I encourage, if you want to type in the chat box, when every company has stepped up their game that much, then this is a huge logistical effort. Through this knowledge should then be used to distribute the vaccines. How can the government utilize this knowledge? I mean, the answer is, of course, they could pay attention and learn, but I don't know that that's been a hallmark of the government, these past 200 years. But I mean, there's certainly some tangible lessons that have been learned in the private sector about how to survive this. And while, it might be easier for larger companies, I think we will see a shift. And I think I can't forget when you said that, the comment that, as people were kind of looking to navigate, how to just exist during this past year, and the significant concern for small local businesses, which to a certain extent was there, has been, enhanced by this circumstance, because of course, like you said, their company dropped, revenue 70–80%. That was a story for a great many. And of course, a lot of them are no longer here. So it's good that they survived. But, obviously it's a life-changing circumstance. And while e-commerce is certainly part of the strategy and all of the technologies behind it, as things kind of continue to wind, there's really two options. One, try to get back to everything exactly how it was, or try to devise some middle, compromise, the middle ground. And I think it's pervasive across the business community, because business travelers, have a certain set of patterns. And let's face it, that kind of carried them all along the way, whether they're buying things at airports, in their destination, they're staying at hotels, all of the strategy around that, we're looking for concentrations of visitors, whether it be for business or for tourism. Those were the two things. And of course, both of those things were dramatically impacted. As we kind of return, I think we're going to see, a slight, expansion of kind of the geographic coverage of people. I know in San Francisco, for instance, a lot of folks at some of our larger clients, Facebook and Google, a lot of those folks who, were either crammed into the city or, at some, housing developments down along the peninsula have, said, if we're going to be all remote this year, I'm going to go back home, whether it's to Kansas or Wisconsin or Ohio, and work from there. Now, while there's, significant pressure to, not make that a permanent stance, I think there will be a degree of permanence for that. And that will affect, particularly from a marketing standpoint, everything, right? The data is all based upon who buys what and where. If all of that has shifted, and it doesn't come back to just, we know everything's going to be exactly as it was in January of 2020, then, the collection of data and the utilization of that data as it kind of unwinds this, I think is going to be 2 or 3 years. And Bonnie, for your business, how is Phil's kind of looking at that from an expansion strategy? I know you had mentioned that, you had, 2020 physical expansion plans. Certainly some of that was disrupted. Have you kind of revised your approach? And if so, what kind of data are you using to kind of predict where those concentrations will be whether it's Metro Chicago, Metro DC, Metro New York, I don't know, Metropolitan Orlando. A lot of data to
Yeah.
collect, I assume.
A lot of data, and I think, some of the trends from a marketing perspective is like CDPs are huge, huge, I would say, investment that brands would have to consider this year, right? Like, how do you aggregate all of that customer data? How can you report on it? How can you leverage it to start making the decisions that you need to make? And so, for us, again, like the beauty, well, maybe not the beauty, but people leaving the Bay Area, kind of taking their fills with them. So we've seen the geographical shift of, people who are, who have been diehard Phil's fans and they've moved back home to Wisconsin or, Washington. And so we're seeing a lot of online orders start to move outside of our California markets into other places that could be interesting real estate targets for the future, right? But I think for Phil's, so much of our experience is that store in-person experience. We're about building communities, and we really invest in making those relationships, those local relationships with every store that we open. And so communities that we want to open in are really important to us. And I don't think that'll change from our perspective of retail targets or retail strategy. The markets that were interesting to us, before COVID will still be interesting to us because they're aligned with our, our consumer, the kind of consumer or the kind of place that we will want to be. Whether or not that footprint changes, I think is probably up for debate, right? Like to your point earlier, will we still open really large community stores? We'd love to, and but how does that change if, if we're not, if a lot of people aren't really comfortable hanging out in coffee shops anymore? So again, I think there's a lot of conversations on how to adapt growth. But again, the trend of like moving towards investing in a CDP or looking more closely at your consumer data is going to really help to inform, I think, better business decisions for any brand. You kind of can't ignore, omnichannel is so I feel like it's such a trendy word, but it's true. You can't really ignore the cross-channel investment or cross-channel promotion from a marketing perspective. But you have to really sit down and look at the data to see how are consumers changing their behavior, and then really where are they going to? So I don't know. Would we open a store in Orlando, Florida? I'm not quite sure, but maybe if there's a ton of Phil's fans migrating there, I think it could be a point of discussion for the future.
Well, I mean, that brings up an interesting point. A lot of my clients have kind of said, well, there's really two options for us, right? Well, I guess there's three. Do the same thing we were already going to do. We already know that's not a viable option. Two, the smaller footprint, enhancing omni-channel, but focus more on getting the product to the customer with as minimal space as possible and then minimizing the interaction as possible. But on the other side, they said, or the alternative, actually make a bigger store, use e-commerce and the digital marketing strategy to drive people to that, but they can accommodate more people, very wide lanes, very wide this, very wide that, and recreate that community. Because for many of our clients, right, the experience, of course, it's about the product, but getting to the product is about the experience that get there. You've seen that in banks, right? I forget which bank it was. They reinvented the lobby, so it more looks like a cafe. But there's still a bank in there. I don't know if that worked or if it didn't work. But I mean, the point is, I would argue that's not one of those things that people love, hanging out in banks. But people do love to hang out in a coffee shop. There's a social aspect to going shopping, whether it's bikes, high-end, commodity products. If you're going to Costco, commodities, and all of these things are predicated on there needs to be the ability to segregate space. And you can do that. And many say, well, actually, we're going to build larger stores. We still want to that. A lot of the higher end products are really predicated on the idea that there is more point to person interaction, even if it needs to be spaced out. And of course, I've got some tight coffee shops back home that, right, I mean, you're 2 feet away for even, 4 inches away from every person in the store. So you really can fit 2 people in their store at a time at this point. That's not going to be viable. So they had to shutter it and make a counter. But I mean, that's interesting because there's that bifurcation. I think we're going to use a lot of data collection this year and understanding how to apply the collection and use of that data, which becomes a tricky point, as I mentioned before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like there's definitely trends. I think that what Mike was saying before is transparency and being honest about the situation that we're all in, right? And having that empathy for the customer. I think also, like, to your point, there is going to be a shift, I think even if we go back to normal, of having more of those communities live online, right? And so providing people a destination. I mean, like, we're all online right now and kind of just like hanging out and having a conversation. There's not to say, it's not to say that you can't do that for a coffee shop as well, right? So we're thinking about, from a marketing perspective, we work with a lot of influencers, and traditionally you would have like a special influencer, event in one of our coffee shops. Like, how does that change when you're driving a lot of now e-commerce, or, we call it Fills at Home. So we're like doing a lot of campaigns for Fills at Home. Can you bring that in-person community online, right? So like, like Clubhouse app is like all the rage now in the news, right? Like, are you going to see more of those kinds of offerings, those kinds of technologies, those kinds of communities start to change? And for us, that's super interesting, because again, like, so much of our brand, why, consumers obviously love our product, they love our coffee, but they also love the experience of coming to our shop, like meeting one another, being with one another. And so it's a really interesting challenge for us. Like, how do you scale that in-person contact and experience to digital, or to your online store or your website? Can you replicate some of that feeling as people start to get back to normal, or as people start to feel comfortable, like waiting in line with 50 people to get a cup of coffee?
Right. I'll be honest, I'm not the first person who loves to go into a big crowded space. I never was. But kind of opening it up, I love the idea of having, all the streets that have been blocked off, and the restaurants building, kind of little shanty cages and, tables and chairs outside. I think that's great. It feels more like France or, the Riviera. And, there's certainly something to do it. If you can apply that to different, channels and different types of products. I mean, going back to the Teams commercial for the bike, I remember really at the beginning of the pandemic, I bought my bike at a local bike shop. I could order it on Amazon, right? It would have been easy enough, but I'm like, well, I really want to talk to somebody and kind of understand. I'm not a sophisticated bike user, but I want to get a good bike. So I went to the local shop, and of course you couldn't go in, they had to come out and one at a time bring a bike out. But then that commercial showed me, I bet a lot of people are still buying bikes. They can have that experience, but it's really a combination of those two. So I think truly that is the answer. And I think for us, it's going to be how to really enable the safe and useful aspects of collecting that data. Because then, there's obviously a lot more privacy laws in effect in California and other places that really affect how you collect and use data. And that's going to continue to be scrutinized. But in that lies the answer for the survival for many companies. And I think that's going to be critical in the next 2 to 3 years. So I think there is an answer, and I think the collaboration around it is something that we all work on. Any final thoughts? I'll kick it over to you, Mike, on that before we close out. And I'd ask anyone to ask questions. The chat room is open.
Yeah, the data aspect of it is interesting. And, I'm sure a lot of organizations now are starting to move towards selling in third-party marketplaces. We've seen a lot of that, whether it's Amazon and eBay, and that's, again, I just want to stress out why omnichannel is so important, because that's a great strategy, right? If I can't attract people to my store, if I can't attract, if I'm trying to expand my footprint, sell on Amazon. We'll deal with some lower having to pay them out some margins in order to get our branding out there. But to bring it back to omnichannel and why it's so important to also have your own e-commerce web store is, not aside from the margins, Amazon's not giving you the data, right? You don't know where your customers are that are buying from Amazon. You also don't have a way of being able to turn them into a true customer or an advocate, right? That's a one-time purchase. You can't upsell, cross-sell. So it's interesting, and the companies that are going to be successful at it are going to find a unique blend of using everything. And like I bought these oil diffusers. It's like my favorite scent in the world: teak wood and tobacco, which makes for an interesting blend. But I bought it on Amazon, a company called the PF Candle Company, and when it showed up in a box, there was a little card in there that said, hey, it was a personalized card. Thanks for, purchasing from us. We're a small local owned business based out of wherever. Here's a 20% off coupon for your next purchase directly from our website.
To go to them.
And now I bought my next time from their website. I get their emails. They've converted me, right? They've upsold, cross-sold me. And so there's a way to use those third-party marketplaces, but don't let that be, don't let that be your end all be all.
That is, I know we got 1 minute left, but that is probably an excellent point because I've experienced that as well. And I think from a diversification of product set, right? They give you maybe 4 choices that you buy on Amazon, but if you go to their site, there's like 400 choices, and that's what converts you to a customer. So in that case, there's a strategic play, and they've worked around the system to their advantage, and that's the best they could do at this point. Well, I didn't see any other questions come in. We're right at time, I believe. Yvonne, did want to get.
Perfect.
You could make any comments at the end before you cut the line? I'm gonna take your time away from you.
I just received a text from one of our attendees that it was a very interesting panel and very easy to follow, and he really appreciated everyone on it. So thank you so much. I truly loved having you here, loved sharing your point of views with our ACG Silicon Valley community. I hope to see you again soon. If anybody has a follow-up question, let us know. Contact me or Carol, and we'll put you in touch. And otherwise, have a very happy Tuesday. And thank you again.
It is Tuesday. Yeah, thank you all.
It is Tuesday.
Bye. Have a good one.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye now.
Bye.